I'm going to eat a Magnum as well in this episode. Now, I use Suno AI to create it. I wrote the lyrics and I'll play it for you shortly. I'm going to use an example of a bigger brand that I actually don't think have done this that well. Ironically, just as a fun fact as well that I come across while I was researching. But now we're going to go left field for a second. Some of these videos have 12 million views on them. Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the Push Podcast. My name's Jack Ferguson, an experienced brand strategist with a science background. In my career, I've worked across 25 industries and helped increase client and employer revenue by over $40 million. I will be your host. This season of the podcast is essential listening for marketers looking to better sell their strategies to stakeholders, get client buy-in, and keep internal teams engaged. Thanks for being here, and don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 64 of the Push Podcast. I created a song recently, a song for my own brand using AI, and I thought, why don't I share that with you? So I'm going to play that song later on in this episode. And I wanted to share my experience about creating audio with AI and how I think we can apply that to brands. So I'll be talking about that throughout the episode, but also about sonic branding in general, and why I think there's an opportunity that has opened up for small to medium brands to take advantage of this now. Often brand is associated with the visual, and there is good reason for that, but there are huge opportunities with audio, I think, and some brands take advantage of this, some don't. So I'll talk about a ton of case studies in this episode. I'm going to link to the resources in the description, as I'm not able to insert a lot of the actual clips due to copyright and trademark and whatnot into the episode itself, but I will link to it all in the description so you can play along at home. And I'm going to eat a Magnum as well in this episode. Yep, you heard that right. Didn't think I'd ever say this on the podcast, but here we are. And that will become apparent why I'm doing that soon enough. A lot of the examples I'm going to be talking about for sonic branding will come from bigger brands in this episode, but I am going to discuss how smaller brands can use it as well. So onto the song that I created. Now, this song was called, or is called, A Day in the Life of a Marketer. Now, I used Suno AI to create it. I wrote the lyrics, and I'll play it for you shortly. I was a musician in my past life. I've written quite a few songs before, and I even made a couple of albums when I was younger, when I was playing in punk and heavy metal bands. Those days are a long way behind me now, but I still pick up the guitar every second day, so I've got a good idea still about how music works, and I have a lot of ideas about how brands can take advantage of this new world of AI. And I've got a lot of ideas about how brands can take advantage of music as well. But I'm not just going to talk about music in this episode. I'm going to talk about auditory assets in general. So why is there an opportunity for audio at the moment? I think one reason is to do with competition for attentions. There's a lot of stimulus in the environment that's competing for visual attention. That's much lower with hearing. Touch is somewhere in the middle. And then you've got smell and taste. And they're both very low. So I call smell and taste the optional senses because they're not always on, whereas I call vision, hearing, and touch as always on because we're always seeing something, we're always hearing something, and we're always touching something. To give you an idea of how much stimulus is available to each of these senses in the environment, so I'm only going to talk about vision, touch, and hearing here. But if I ratio that out, that would bring vision in at 100, touch in at 10, and hearing in at 1. So hearing or audio is a lot less competitive for attention. Let me know if you ever want me to put the data for this stuff somewhere that you would like to go and have a look at afterwards. I don't talk about it too much in the episode just because it would take up too much time, but I have started thinking that maybe I should produce something after the episode where you can go and access that. Now, obviously, those ratios are context dependent. So if you're at a rock concert, this is not going to be the breakdown, but people spend very little time in their lives at rock concerts. So that is the general breakdown of the ratio of stimulus. Hearing is also the most stimulus efficient. So it's a less noisy channel, but also when we do receive stimulus, it is a lot more efficient to process. We can compare that to something like vision, and you've probably heard the saying that we're visual creatures, but vision is a lot more expensive to process for the body. The body is parsimonious, so it doesn't like using energy unless it has to. It's quite ruthless about how much energy it's going to put into something. So if you think about vision, there's almost an oversupply of stimulus and there's relatively heavy processing costs to it. Compare that to hearing or audio, where there's a lot less competition for stimulus and the processing power required is a lot lower as well. A few other things with audio, it does engage both conscious and pre-conscious processing, especially music. If we're going to talk about music, it is designed across time and can still be emotionally effective while not actively being focused on. So we can think about the calming effect that a certain type of musical style might have on us, but we don't actually have to be paying active attention to it for it to have that impact on the body. Vice versa, if we've got the death metal cranking in the background, that will also likely have an effect on the body, even if we're not paying active attention to it. For a brand, vision and hearing are typically the most accessible. They're the senses that can be transmitted digitally. Obviously, the others, touch, smell, and taste, have to have that physical interaction element, which isn't always possible if you don't have a physical interaction with your customers. But having said that, it's not necessarily an either-or case either. So you might have heard the saying that horror movies aren't really that scary without the sound on. So multiple senses can still work together to create an effect. So if we were to look at the tagline of a company, for example, you can have a tagline which is simply just visual or messaging if it's through text, but audio adds in more variables to it, so such as timing, intonation or pitch and mood. The tagline that's top of mind for me at the moment when I speak about this is, can somebody say menu log? Or in the US, I think it's, did somebody say just eat? There's messaging here, but there's also timing. And the brand asset is more like a jingle than it is just straight text. The other thing I wanted to speak about up front is that a lot of brands don't actually have a sonic branding guide. It might be worth paying a bit more attention to it because, again, it's a bit of a competitive advantage. I've linked to a sonic branding guide from Toyota in the description, just so you can have an idea of what one looks like if you haven't seen one before. It's not the best I've seen, but it's okay and it is public and it gives you an idea if you were looking to familiarise yourself with that. The last thing I'll say about sound is that it is great for spillage. So spillage being that if someone's using it or interacting with your brand in some way, that people around can also hear that or come across your brand. So in another episode 59 in this season, I talked about my first interaction with spillage in my whole life with a video game when I was young. I think I was a teenager and I heard one of my friends playing a game, but what drew me in initially was the soundtrack. It was playing a style of music I liked. That got my attention. I came over to see what was going on, and that's what introduced me to the video game, which admittedly I probably didn't end up playing that much, but I knew about it from that point. We could think about something like the opening sound on a Microsoft computer when you start up your computer. People around you can hear it. We could think about an iPhone ringtone. People around can hear that ringtone. These are all examples of things that you don't necessarily have to be engaging with yourself, but if someone's using it and it is attributed to a brand, it can be heard by others in the vicinity and get you extra attention for nothing. So let's get into some of the use cases because this is probably the part of the episode that you're really keen for, and then we'll play the song shortly. Don't worry, I'm going to do that too. But I'll start off with a bit of a left field use case, and that is that there was one brand that went the other way. If you were in Australia over the last 20 years or so, you might know this brand. And what I mean by went the other way is that they would play advertisements on TV and they'd have no sound behind them. And this was Rivers. So they were a retailer in Australia. It was a very unique approach. There's probably only one brand that can do that, but shout out to them for going against the grain. They're not around anymore, but good on you for making innovative ads. I've linked to one in the description of the episode. So yes, in an environment where you ordinarily always have audio, which is a TV ad, they didn't have any audio at all. It was just imagery. So you can go through to the clip on YouTube if you haven't seen it before. The other things you can do, and here's where we come up to the song, is that you can have a distinctive song. So if we look at something like the Friends TV show, which I've done an episode on that as well, that is episode 51 of this season. Everyone knows that song is the Friends song. They'd play the song at the start of the show, and in that particular case, it got a really cool flywheel effect. So it started as a jingle, actually, and it was about 40 seconds long, and it was so popular that the show commissioned a full single, cleverly, I would say, and radio stations would play it extensively, and that song was already attributed to the show. So over and over again, people were hearing this song. Radio stations and external environments were incentivized to play this song because people wanted to hear the song, and that kept on bringing people's attention back to the brand, growing the interest in the brand, and then that can compound over time as that flywheel keeps on spinning round and round and round. But if you want to have a long listen to that case study, I did that in episode 51 of this season. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you might know the song at the start of that show. That's very distinctive as well. Obviously, other use cases is using music behind advertising, or you could have a style of music that's played in your retailer or in your physical presence, or you could have a soundtrack in a video game, for example. There are many use cases for it. But I do think that now brands that are smaller than the behemoths are going to have a better access to this with AI. And I will play the song for you that I made in a minute to give you an idea of what can be produced. So I wrote the lyrics to the song. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It was a lot of fun. And then I had AI co-create the rest of it with me, so co-create the music with me. I'll talk about it a bit more shortly, but in the meantime, here is A Day in the Life of a Marketer created by me and AI.
Another day in the life of a marketer. The CFO says, let's get on TikTok. The CEO says, my daughter's friend's cousins. Daughter's boyfriend said he thinks our emails are too boring. Marketing, the profession where everyone else knows better than you. They're just gifted without having to study it. Marketing, where everyone else knows more than you. So generous with their opinions, you don't even need to ask. Where revenue is all your fault if it's down, but the boss is the hero if it's up. Where free will is non-existent, make them buy now, make them buy now, make them buy now. Another day in the life of a marketer. The CFO says, let's get on TikTok. The CEO says, my daughter's friend's cousins. Daughter's boyfriend said he thinks our emails are too boring. Our customers are on holiday. Doesn't matter. Make them buy. Our audience is in a cyclone. Doesn't matter. Make them buy. There is a global pandemic. Doesn't matter. Make them buy. There's an alien invasion. Doesn't matter. Make them buy. There's an alien invasion. Doesn't matter. Make them buy now. Make them buy now. Make them buy now. Another day in the life of a marketer. The CFO says, let's get on TikTok. The CEO says, my daughter's friend's cousins. Daughter's boyfriend said he thinks our emails are too boring.
So there you have it. It was a lot of fun to make, but I made it all from my desktop. I did that all on the computer. Didn't have to go into a studio, didn't have to play any instruments. That was all done at my computer with Suno AI. Not sponsored or anything like that, but that's just the program I used. You might have a question now about ownership, and I don't want to get into the legalities in this episode because that's not my area of expertise, but to my understanding, I own that song. If you're going to do it yourself, obviously, and use it for your brand, get your own legal advice, but to my understanding, I own it. So small to mid-sized brands do have a couple of compounding issues when it comes to music, I believe. So first one being that if you're going to license a song that already has existing equity in it, so if we're talking brand asset terms, fame or recognition, then if it's really well known, it's going to be very expensive for a start, and your distinctiveness And what I mean by that is the attribution of that song to your brand is going to be tough work, right? Because it's already known as its own song. So to attribute that song to your brand, you're going to have to promote the song with your brand. And you're effectively taking a higher recognition asset or a higher fame asset, and you're trying to build distinctiveness with it and attributing that to your brand. It's also expensive. So you could also go perhaps a lower fame asset that's not as well known, but then you still need to spend the money to get the distinctiveness up and get that attributed to your brand. One way around that is that perhaps there's a subculture of people that do engage with your brand, and perhaps they have a certain genre of music that they do listen to. That genre of music, if it's less well known, but it is quite high fame within that subculture, might be something you could approach, as it's likely to not cost as much to license it as well. You're still going to have the challenge with distinctiveness and brand attribution. The other thing to consider is to use some AI to create some music. And while that song will have really low fame or really low recognition because no one knows it, you've just created it, your ability to make that distinctive for you, attribute that to your brand, will have a higher ceiling because it's not going to be attributed elsewhere if you get it right. I'm going to use an example of a bigger brand that I actually don't think have done this that well recently, and that's KFC. You may have seen the ads that use the I Love It song from Icona Pop, and I would theorise that they've chosen this, or someone's chosen this, and it's got more to do with short-term incentives than it has to do with owning a song for a period of time. Yes, that song is very, very well known, but that also means it'd be very expensive to license. And your distinctiveness or your brand attribution is going to have a ceiling on it. It's never going to be fully yours. And KFC actually have the distribution power to encode a song into the psyche. So it's interesting they choose one where the ceiling for brand attribution is going to be lower. As I said, I suspect it's probably something to do with short-term incentives because, yes, in the short term, it will probably have a better effect because it's already known. In brand terms, fame is high, but distinctiveness will be harder and there'll be a cap and they're going to be spending a lot of money on advertising anyway. If you have your own jingle, it is a longer term commitment as fame is initially going to be lower. But if done well, the opportunity for distinctiveness will have a higher ceiling. And if you're going to do it over the years, which KFC are probably not going out of business tomorrow, that would make more sense over the long term. Where I think their approach would work better would be something more like a reality TV show. So they're trying to cash in on some short-term equity, and that reality show might go for one season. They probably don't have time to attribute an audio asset to them that they create themselves. Or if they do, it may not be worth the cost because they might be only going for that season anyway. They probably won't have time to embed the song into the market and attribute that to their brand. So it's just better to piggyback off the back of an existing song. In that case, I would agree, in a perfect world. And licensing a song isn't cheap, and I wouldn't really consider it a brand asset. I think it's more like you're renting equity from the artist. Another example of where this happened is when AO, the brand, used Hey Ho, Let's Go, the Ramones song Blitzkrieg Bob, which I have linked to in the description. Kind of cool, works well, but again, they're going to have to pay for that forever and they still will never fully own it. So you could use something like Suno to make a song or a jingle. The other thing I thought of is getting a jingle or song most of the way there to brief someone else to make the rest of it. So we could get some elements of this to a point where we can present it to a consultant or specialist and go, this is kind of what we're thinking. Can you translate the rest of it into its foundational elements for our brand? And it does just force us to know more about our brand and think about it a bit deeper, right? So what genre of music best represents your brand? What beat per minute song best represents your brand? Beats per minute is the speed of a song. The more beats per minute, obviously the faster the song. Alternatively, you could make a song and use parts of the song as a jingle. It's not always the case that a jingle is a subset of a song. Sometimes a jingle can just be a jingle. For example, did someone say menu log? But I have linked to a few examples in the description that I like and I dislike. So I'll talk you through those. Now, Kino in Australia, they had I thought it was a great jingle. Personal preference, but I did think it was amazing. It was Spot Match Wind. I'll link to that in the description. Have a listen to that. I'm pretty sure you will recognise that if you were in Australia 25 to 15 years ago. There's another jingle that I linked to from Domino's, and I'm not going to talk about it so much because it's annoying and it's probably memorable, but I put it in there as one of the ones as a jingle that I like less. McDonald's also have a very distinctive jingle, which I've linked to. So just click through the links in the description and you'll see what I'm talking about. The other thing we can do with audio is we can have a distinctive sound. Now, I mentioned a few of these before, but the Microsoft opening music when you turn on the computer, like iPhone ringtone, even Apple packaging, when you open the packaging, it has a distinct sound to it. Harley Davidson, when you fire up your motorbike, it has a distinctive sound to it. When you turn on Netflix, the ta-dum, when it loads, has a distinctive sound. Ironically, just as a fun fact as well that I come across while I was researching this is Brian Eno, the person who composed the Microsoft opening sounds, certainly back in 95, I think it was, he used a Mac to create that. So I thought that was funny. But now we're going to go left field for a second and I'm going to talk about Magnum, the ice cream brand. So they have done something in the last couple of years that I think is very innovative with sound. And they've leveraged ASMR, which you may or may not have heard of before, autonomous sensory meridian response. It's very big in streaming and that type of thing. But basically it just means that certain sounds, in this case, can cause like a pleasurable tingling sensation. So it's also known as synesthesia, and that's phenomenon where the stimulation of one sense, so let's say sound, leads to like involuntary experiences in other sensory or cognitive pathways. So an example of that may be nails on a chalkboard. So you hear that sound and then it has a physical impact on your body. ASMR is typically cross-modal like that. You hear something but then feel it. Or if we're talking about visuals, example might be that you see someone you don't want to see and you feel your stomach drop. So you see something and then it causes a physical sensation in the body. But back to Magnum here. What's this got to do with them, right? So a lot of people, the sound of biting into a Magnum, it turns out, can invoke synesthesia, or can be used for ASMR. I'm going to give you an example of that. So I'm going to bite into a Magnum, and I never thought I'd do this on a podcast, but here we go. It's not sponsored. I bought it from the shop. It may or may not have an effect on you, but here's what it sounds like. So yes, that just happened. I ate a Magnum on the podcast. But again, where am I going with this? Because who cares really still? There's probably not going to be much spillage there. It's hard for someone else to actually hear someone else eating a Magnum, I presume. But what has happened is there's been videos created on YouTube of people just eating Magnums. And some of these videos have 12 million views on them, which is incredible to me. And it's such a powerful way to get a brand to spread. And what I appreciate so much about this, though, is that the promotion of the brand itself has a benefit to the consumer. So they want to consume the promotion of the brand because it's ASMR for them. It's incredible. I've linked to the video in the description. But the other part to take notice of here, I think, is that Magnum says that they come up with this because they were social listening. So that's what brought their attention to this. People on social media were talking about how nice it was to hear the crack of the Magnum when you bite into it, a distinctive sound. Magnum may or may not have known that they had this distinctive sound, but they have certainly taken full advantage of it now. And it's then also shaped their Nothing Cracks Like Magnum, a global campaign that they ran off the back of it. So what we can ask here, I think, is of ourselves is, does our brand have a distinctive sound already that we aren't leveraging? And bonus points if there's an embedded benefit to the consumer that they want to actually consume content from that brand, from the product of that brand, or something embedded in that brand that doubles, that compounds the benefits. I think these are questions worth asking. So another interesting use case as well for sound is Pizza Hut's recent Pizza Before the Hut campaign. Again, I've linked to it in the description, but this one's very recent as of the release of this episode. In America, so in the NFL, the quarterback, who's effectively the captain of the team, who's directing the plays, will say hut just before they're about to start a play. That's all you need to know about it. Pizza Hut's come in and they've quite cleverly leveraged prominence. So by prominence, I mean just the occurrence of something in everyday life. And they've said that if any quarterback says pizza before the hut, so Pizza Hut, it'll have to go like, they will give that city free pizzas. And there's T's and C's in there, of course. But I like this because you can imagine how often people will be thinking of Pizza Hut while they're watching the game. They'll be listening out to see if any quarterback actually says Pizza Hut and not just Hut. I think it's engaging. It's fun. It'll stir up a lot of conversation. It will probably annoy a lot of quarterbacks, but it's sure to remain a topic of conversation and giving the brand a lot of attention. What's more, professional athletes probably unlikely to diverge from what they do. So their free pizzas are also probably safe as well. But I think that's a great example of how they've leveraged prominence. They've been creative about it. Something that's already in the world that a brand can bolt itself onto and inspire the market or the community to engage with that brand in a fun way. For a smaller brand, again, we might not be able to do something to that extent, but maybe there is something in a subculture where we can insert ourselves creatively. So, thanks for listening in. The questions I'll leave you with today are, what would your sonic brand guide look like? I've linked to Toyota's in the description, but maybe that's something to think about. What's a sound, utterance, or any other auditory phenomenon that occurs that you could attach yourself to or attach your brand to? What song would suit your brand? You could just start with beats per minute and genre. Maybe just grab some copy off your website and post it into Suno as the lyrics and get a feel for what that looks like for your brand. What type of song would suit your brand? If you want a quick proxy for beats per minute, 180 beats per minute is I'm Still Standing by Elton John and Footloose by Kenny Loggins. 160 beats per minute is, say, Hey Ya by Outkast or Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. 140 beats per minute is Beat It by Michael Jackson or Summer of 69 by Bryan Adams. 120 beats per minute, Poker Face by Lady Gaga or Take On Me by a-ha. 100 beats per minute, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees and Dancing Queen by ABBA. Or those songs are close to those beats per minute. Maybe not precisely, but close enough to give you an idea of speed. And the last question is going to be, is there something in your brand that already sounds distinctive that you aren't capitalizing on? Some questions to think about. That's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Push Podcast. Please remember to subscribe, and if you are enjoying the episodes, please leave a review of the podcast on your platform of choice. It really helps to build the podcast credibility and to help others find this type of information.